pirates. All right, everything to order. We have EFL reinforcements inbound. Captain Screen and Cruelty are in the general area and 3 days out at most. Our standard communications are jammed with either a dial tone or some kind of electronic scream. Miles states before there's a clearing of a throat. You forgot to mention to the rest of the planet that we're under attack and strange robots have been seen at the outskirts of communities. Duchess Lilpaw says, I thought that first point was already obvious with the communications jamming, but the second I was about to get to, Miles says, and there's some shuffling around. This meeting is over the secure emergency network, which works well, but for the sake of expediency, is audio only and has maximum priority. Cut to the chase, what's going on? Sai, this shit started in your turf. Are you with us? Jake demands. I am, but injured, Sai responds. The Vekas have returned, and one of their number, Amarada Vekas, has awoken a mother massacre. From what Jana Vekas, who has been most cooperative, has been able to tell me, Mother Massacre was once a flesh and blood sociopath. One whom was also a sadist and worked for the precursor of the Vekas family's precursor's precursor. Very long story short, a pet lunatic and mass murderess in the employ of a criminal gang got synthetically upgraded and betrayed, turned from a well-paid killer into a pet and weapon. That's what we're dealing with. After it's been upgraded time and again, as well as mass copied to be fired like a missile at enemy targets, albeit with far more collateral. How are you injured? Beck asks. My arms are so covered in bandages, I resemble the honored dead of your homeland. Thankfully, my armor and brand held up perfectly. The Mother Massacre is capable of Axiom use despite having tritite coating. That's going to be a problem. She's also capable of teleportation and can leave behind explosives as she does so. She's fast, vicious, and the vitals you go for by reflex are not proper targets. I impaled her through the neck and it didn't even annoy her. She didn't go for the face? No, she did not, Sai says in a contemplative tone. If I may, Bearman asks. By all means. I managed to get a hefty chunk of the information off the computer in there. A lot of it is information about other caches the Vics have hidden, with a note stating that there are more, meaning that Mother Massacre has a lot of resources. It did, however, have some interesting good news, which is, she retrieved the pod, we have no information, and she has effectively doubled herself. That's just it, she hasn't. Part of the programming they forced into Mother Massacre was that two instances will not coexist. If one of them knows where another active mother is, then her top priority becomes the destruction of the mother. This was hard built into the code so deep that she can't even consider reprogramming or cannibalizing the other. It's a security mechanism. So as bizarre as it sounds, the winning move is to wake up a second Mother Massacre. Byron explains, and there's a silence. Let's put a pin on that. With the risk of there being some splashback, I don't put much stock into the safety features implemented by criminals. But if you can find the other caches, try to do so. Every one we can compromise is less resources for Massacre, and that makes her easier to deal with. Also, it could be the fuck it option if we do find more of her. Miles says, I see, what should I do if I start finding more of her? Worst case scenario, I hit 5 caches and find 5 massacres waiting to wake up. Then we pull them apart and look through them. If they can be made to turn against one, then we set one loose with some additions in case she turns on us. What more do we know about these things? Lil Paw says, and there's a pause. Yes, I've found what's basically instructions on how to basically operate one. Although granted, it's summarized as, wake it up while providing DNA sample and do as it tells you, Bearman says. And before you ask, the DNA sample has her latch onto and treat as the head of a new branch. So Mother Massacre will protect Amarada then? She's a weak point. She's a weak point that's going to be hidden and behind a small army, at least at all times, Bearman notes. But it does mean that she's willing to sacrifice the other two. Gabrisa and Emiri are likely easy to capture. I don't think that will help us much, unless they know where further caches are. Lil Paw begins and then comes to a realization. There's the final point. I have a recording of what Jana Vegas has told me. I'm going to play it into the emergency network. These things need to be found and disarmed wherever they are. These are basically extinction events waiting to happen. All right, you do that after this? I need to go now. I've promised to only be away from my children for a short time. From what I understand, there are already drones on the outside of the city. They haven't done anything yet, but I won't allow my family to be at risk, Bearman says. Get moving, but keep your emergency communicator on you. Also your ward belt. It's not as good as our brands, but it's a very good second place. Miles tells him, knowing that the man won't listen to an order to do otherwise. I'll do that. Avail yourself of the nearby armory. Make sure you have a spread of all 3 types of gun: kinetic, plasma, and laser. We don't know what these drones are capable of, and I'd rather you be overarmed than under. I was planning on that anyways, Byron states. I need to go now. I'm setting this information to release over the emergency channel in 30 minutes. These tales need to be heard. My mother told me terrible things about Mother Massacre. Her name has been erased, her true name at any rate. If such a monster deserves one, she was always a monster. Some people are just wrong, unable to feel for others, unable to care. They can swim over the body of someone in agony as easily as empty water. Normally, these people don't care enough to actually do something with this terrible emptiness. But Mother Massacre, a flesh and blood wehrmeyer at the time, found that she could fill this hole with suffering and death. Jana takes a moment to steady herself. Her breathing is shuddering in the recording. This is also far from rare enough in the galaxy. But Mother Massacre was rarer still. She had a final gift that made her even more dangerous than merely being an unfeeling sadist. She was patient. She knew that if she just indulged alone, she would die alone. So she sought out allies and found our ancestors. She looked for opportunity and cruelty and found exactly that. The records are unclear and the stories are even less so. All that's known is we were in some kind of business of death. Were we mercenaries? Criminals then as now? Were we war ladies seeking a swath of the galaxy to call our own? Pirates, rebels, enforcers? I do not know. The record is long lost over many generations. Only Mother Massacre remains. She was accepted, and she excelled. An unfeeling, unstopping, unhesitating killing machine, more efficient than any drone, robot, or full synth, is an immense boon in battle. But she wasn't perfect. No, she wasn't perfect. She would gather wounds. She began to age, and she deeply, deeply distrusted restorative comas. She feared it. She feared them more than anything, knowing that there was a chance, however slim, that her emptiness would be filled. And if she ever felt compassion for those she had brutalized, if she were even capable of mercy, of feeling, of care, that it would kill her. So she sought a different path to repair shattered and broken limbs. She found another way. She used more and more synthetics to repair her slowly breaking body until nothing of the flesh remained, which is when a trap was sprung. You see, the ancestors were not fools, were never fools, and only a true fool looks to the past and sees nothing but foolishness. They added some things to the upgrades, bit by bit, little touches that made her stronger, more skilled even as they paid her a fortune to do as she loved. Then when the final piece came into place, her will was torn away. Her name was broken and forgotten. Whoever she was before, she was nothing but Mother Massacre now. Of course, that's not to say she grew weaker. Oh no, she grew stronger still. No longer caring for money, endlessly loyal and unquestioning. She stopped being an overly sadistic vessel of destruction and pain. She became even colder than the ice water that flowed through her veins. She became even more calculating. She became clinical, effective, and utterly psychotic. She modified her body further to counter adepts with tri-type plating. She replaced her synthetic womb with a powerful hard drive containing plans and blueprints, all the weapons she would ever need to burn entire worlds down. She no longer felt either pleasure or pain. She could consider nothing but her loyalty to the family and how to destroy its enemies. She became a synthetic force of nature. Mother Massacre is well named, for instead of a womb from which to bring life, is a crystal computer core with the plans of destruction and mayhem. She stopped fighting alone. She learned more than just stealing the weapons of the enemy, but how to repurpose the resources of entire worlds for war. Nothing was too twisted. She spread poison through the air, sent disrupting waves of energy through the axiom to whisper madness to the people. She would empty entire cities with unending drones. Drones that would not speak to each other. There was no hive. There was no message sent to them. She simply remade factories into the wombs to birth unfeeling murder machines like herself. She is the mother of massacres. Reality itself is her victim. Then another voice can be heard over this recording. Then why? Why would Amarada awaken it? Because she heard the other stories first. I told you mine, but there are 3 kinds of stories. I've heard of horror first, but there are stories of great victories, of impossible battles won through Mother Massacre. There are also tales of caution, how it is difficult to undo the damage she does. What tales of victory? The other voice, a pirate from the Claw, asks. She must have been asked to guard Jana. They boil down to one simple question. What do you do when you have an unstoppable, fearless, brilliant, and unending ally? Jana asks. What? You win, Jana answers. The shot rings out and there's a crunch of metal and plastic breaking. Miles says nothing as he stares down the scope of his rifle. After a minute, he calls it in. Enemy down. No response from other units. His target looked like a floating trash can with an obvious gun sticking out the front. There was a sensor bar where the lid would be, and it looked almost harmless. It looked like something that a gobe or cobe might pop out of it. They were playing a prank on someone. Then his eyebrows creak up as there's a slight crackle of energy and the remains of the drone vanish. Enemy is retrieving the remains of destroyed units, likely in a recycling effort. Acknowledge Vuxa, actual. Relaying information. The controller on Zalwar states enemy movement, 7 of the short drones. Miles states before taking a shot as 2 of them cross each other as they weave to attempt to dodge him. 5 drones remain. They scatter and start seeking cover. Another shot rings out. 4. They reach cover and he pours a little bit of attention into the ammunition. He squeezes the trigger again. The shattered remnant of the drones spray backwards. 3 drones remaining. Enemies have adapted and have entered visual blocks from sniping position. So they are intelligent and have a general idea of where you are. Correct, Miles says as he focuses. A film of Axiom covers his eyes and he sees things differently. They're hidden on most wavelengths, but Axiom isn't most. The disruption they cause is quite distinct. The Tri-Tite needs gaps to let the power in after all. Otherwise, these things can't fuel themselves. His rifle lets out another shot. 2 targets remaining, moving to stage 2, capture and study. Use caution. Copy that, Miles replies as he shuffles away from his baby and focuses on one of the links in the Kutha chain that makes up his belt. He vanishes from sight entirely. The gravel on the rooftop crunches and then craters ever so slightly before footsteps can be heard on another roof. Enemy attacks halted. Incoming ambush. Counter-ambush tactics engaged. Mother Massacre states before vanishing. She then appears next to a drone, even as a knife is driven into its retrieval system, and her tendrils lash out at the form that cannot be perceived in any frequency but ultraviolet. Engaging, Mother Massacre states as her tendrils lash out towards the still invisible Miles. A trinity of shots bark out from his revolver and crash against her stomach to shatter harmlessly.